All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Thursday, October 17th, 2019, and we are once again watching our next active tropical threat moving towards the eastern United States. It's been a little while since we talked, especially over on YouTube. We really haven't had any systems that were particularly threatening to the East Coast, but this one is going to be here. So we are looking at potential tropical cyclone 16, this sort of mess of clouds down here in the Gulf of Mexico. It hasn't really gotten that close circulation center yet, so it's not officially been named, but it is expected to move towards the East Coast this weekend here. So what we're looking at again, looking at the Hurricane Center's official track, potential tropical cyclone. All it really designates is the system hasn't quite made it yet as far as its organization is concerned, but it does threaten the coastline within the amount of time that our watches and warnings have to go, which is about 48 hours or less. So if the Hurricane Center sees a storm that could form up in a short time, but they don't have it named yet, then they'll call it a potential tropical cyclone so they can issue their watches and warnings. So if you ever see that, that's kind of what it is. It's a little confusing, but regardless of that, we are looking at potential for a tropical storm to impact the western Florida Panhandle, and then those effects would reach also into Mississippi and Alabama, and then of course into other parts of Florida as well as Georgia and the Carolinas this weekend and into early next week. So what we pretty much got here is a 40-mile-an-hour storm that hasn't quite gotten its organization together yet, but it is expected to be about a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm as it approaches the Florida coastline. What this really is sort of a disorganized storm, and I don't believe this is going to have enough time to really get itself together. One, this isn't a truly classic tropical wave spinning up into a tropical storm and then eventually a hurricane. Like we see a lot of these, they're more classy in nature. Well, this is a little more of a complicated mess. So what we have here is we have our big cold front that came through the other day, situated offshore here, the big bombogenesis low pressure that's getting all the crazy winds along the New England coast. We have the separation of air masses between this cool fall air mass and this warm tropical air mass down here in the south. And typically what happens is we get this cold front, and when it stalls along the Gulf Coast, we see a second low pressure form up and ride off with it. That's very common. It happens all the time. It's a textbook meteorological thing, and usually that's all there is to it. You'll get some rain, wind, whatever, and it'll get out of the way. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but now we have a tropical disturbance that's going to jump right in the way of all this. So what you basically have is you have this mid to upper level low back over Texas. You can see it kind of doing this today, and it's also pulling a lot of upper level winds along with it, which is kind of shearing our tropical disturbance. And then our tropical disturbances center is more down here. So you have this bigger upper level low like this, and you have this smaller low kind of being crapped on right now. But what's going to basically happen is both these lows are going to generally advance in the same direction. They're going to sort of follow this flow right here in the atmosphere, in this mid to upper level flow here that's going off to the east. And they're going to sort of not really combine, but they're going to kind of get closer together, which will sort of allow for more intensification. But what we're going to wind up seeing is kind of a messy subtropical storm. When it's formed, it'll probably be named a subtropical storm because you do have this mix of cooler, drier air trying to infiltrate behind the system, which will be driving some of the thunderstorms. And then some of the thunderstorms will be driven by the warm waters of the Gulf, which are very warm still. We didn't really have a storm this year that kind of kept the Gulf in check, so the waters are plenty warm enough to support anything. But you can see here, you can see by the wind shear and the upper level winds kind of blowing the tops off these storms, it's just not able to really get itself together. If we zoom in a little bit on the system, we can even see that the circulation center is pretty much elongated at this hour. We can see the lower clouds here are sort of following this path, which is this broader low pressure that's more elongated in nature. And until that can consolidate, it's not going to be named because this isn't really a classic, this isn't a circulation center. It's just this big, broad sort of circulation that's not really closed yet. And the reason it can't close off is when it tries to wrap around, it's getting pushed back off by these more stronger upper level winds, thanks to our upper level low I was telling you about. That's kind of keeping this thing from really getting itself together. So what's going to happen is the low level, broad, whatever here is going to have to move north, and this low is going to have to move more directly over the system. And when these things combine and they are not really hurting each other in the short term, then you'll see the system become named and it'll try to get itself together. But the good news is it's not going to have that much time. You're looking at only about 36 hours before landfall. So tomorrow or tonight or early tomorrow, it'll probably be named sometime around here. It'll be Sub Tropical Storm Nestor, and then it'll only have about another 18 to 24 hours before it makes it ashore. So the Hurricane Center is forecasting a storm of about 50 miles an hour at landfall, which is about a pretty good call. It could, overachieve a little bit, and we always tend to kind of give these things a little more credence than they probably have. Someone right along the immediate coast will probably see some 60-mile-an-hour winds or something, but overall, definitely don't think this is going to blow up into some big hurricane. It's just simply the upper levels are too chaotic, too messy, and they're not going to allow it. So, regardless of what exactly gets named, the impacts are going to be the same. Tropical storm warnings are up all the way from New Orleans back through the Florida Panhandle for the most part. The Mississippi coast is not included in these, but Mobile, Alabama, all the way over towards Cedar Key, Florida, there are some kind of watch or warning. The tropical storm watches you see there will go to warnings, and due to the forward speed of this thing being pretty fast, you'll see some of these inland counties will also have to deal with this going into tomorrow, as these tropical storm watches will become warnings. The yellows will turn to red. And the biggest thing with this is going to be the rainfall. So one of the things we always look for when we talk about these subtropical storms, these messy Gulf systems, is they're typically lopsided off to the east. So even though the storm, with high confidence, as we see here by our spaghetti models, as we like to call them, there's really nowhere else for this thing to go except right along on the coast of Florida. There's really no track error. This isn't one of those ones. Is it going to turn? Is it going to go whatever? Like, we know where this thing's going. There's not really much to worry about with that. So the biggest thing is, where exactly do those impacts happen? Well, even though this thing is supposed to come ashore like this along the west coast of Florida, then move up like this, all that you see, the rain is kind of lopsided off to the east side of the storm, where several inches of rainfall are expected, about 4 or so inches along the coast, and then about 2 to 3 inches elsewhere through parts of eastern Alabama, south central Georgia, northeast Florida, and then through the Carolinas, where you can see that rainfall. Those rainfall totals right now running about 1 to 3 inches. And this is a good bit of news for the southeast. This is the U.S. drought monitor here on your left, and then the rainfall totals again on the right as a comparison. And you can see most of these states are in a moderate to severe drought, and this has been going on for a long time, ever since the spring, where all those rains fell in the plains. The rain didn't make it over here that much, and then the summer was fairly hot and fairly dry, which kind of kept the drought persisting. So this drought has been occurring for months. It hasn't like it just hasn't rained all year. It's just a matter of every month there's been a deficit of rainfall. So storms like this will help turn that around, but unfortunately, Nestor is probably not going to be able to produce enough rain to make a massive dent in this, but it will be welcome, and it will be something that the drought will hopefully be improved by, because you have to have something like this to kind of give you that abnormal amount of rainfall to kind of help catch you up in the rainfall department. So very good news for parts of the South who really do need the rain. And some of this will be flooding, but it's not going to be like anything. It doesn't seem to be at this time anything super excessive in that regard. Just a few inches, and it will fall in a short period of time. So there will be some flash flooding issues, but overall, nothing too crazy there. The Storm Prediction Center also has the chances of severe weather being introduced, especially across parts of Florida, as there's squall lines will come ashore. We can see this on the simulated radar that the high resolution NAM has here. This is basically how one model here thinks it's going to come ashore. You can see that those rains will already start across the region as early as Friday evening. 22Z Friday is about 6 o'clock Friday evening. So you'll see some of those showers start then. But basically what happens is, as Nestor comes ashore, since it's going to be a subtropical storm, it'll be a little more hybrid in nature. You'll have all this instability out ahead of it, have this warm Gulf moisture tracking in. You'll probably have some drier, cooler air coming in behind the system, so you'll have the recipe for some strong to severe thunderstorms, and those squall lines could be pretty crazy when they come in. You'll also probably see in northeast Florida, this line here is probably going to be an early converging line. So you'll see these really heavy downpours and strong and possibly actual thunderstorms. They may not be those tropical storms where it's just a lot of rainfall. It may be more of a hybrid where you'll actually have thunder and lightning involved, as well as the threat of tornadoes can't be ruled out. You have a rotating atmosphere, and this thing shows that eye here. If you do see this, it's not going to probably have a well-defined eye. These models tend to overshoot these things a little bit, but they do handle the rest of the environment fairly well. So you can see the strong severe weather tail that develops ahead of Nestor that will kind of push in out ahead of the storm. So that's something we're going to have to watch very carefully. And then as this thing kind of moves off into the mid-Atlantic region, you're going to see the heavy rain shield, but then some of the stronger thunderstorms out ahead of it. So definitely going to be something to watch as Nestor does come ashore. So we'll have some updates on that tomorrow. We'll take a look at this thing in a little more light, probably tomorrow during the day. But for the evening, basically, what you need to know, like again, tropical storm is probably going to form. It's going to be subtropical in nature, but the effects are largely the same. I don't think it's going to have time to really blow up and go crazy, but we are going to have this storm moving ashore, the Florida Panhandle, tomorrow night. or into Saturday morning, probably more likely early Saturday morning, but the effects will start Friday evening, and you'll have heavy rain, chance of surge along the coastline, especially on the Big Bend of Florida. Several feet of storm surge is probably still likely, even if the system isn't all that strong. You got a large fetch of winds and water coming in, so that probably a 2 to 4, or maybe even a 3 to 5 foot storm surge at the immediate coast. So probably need to secure any issues along the coast there, and then just watching for that heavy rain to spread into parts of northeast Florida, south and central Georgia, and into the Carolinas as this does move ashore. So we'll have some more tomorrow to kind of clean up all the forecast details, but that's generally what we're expecting here this evening with PTC 16, soon to be Sub Tropical Storm Nestor. Anyway, guys, that's what I got for you this evening. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.